Hey guys, thanks for joining Learn to Play. My name is Lance, and today we're going to take a look at Tyrants of the Underdark. This is a brand new game that I got to try out at Origins 2016. It's put out by Gale Force 9, and it's a 2 to 4 player game that takes roughly an hour to hour and a half to play. So in this game, it is an area control game mixed with a deck builder. So each player is going to take on the role of a different Drow clan, which for those of you that don't play Dungeons and Dragons, that is Dark Elves. And so they're trying to compete with the other players to build up their deck with new cards that they'll purchase from the market, and also play different abilities that will allow them to put out their troops into different areas of the board to try to gain dominance over those areas and gain victory points that way. So like I said, each player is playing a Drow clan. So in this game, I feel that they did a really good job of capturing that atmosphere because there's a lot of treachery and backstabbing. Players are going to be devouring cards from the market to remove them so that other players don't have an opportunity to get them. And it just seems like that always kind of comes up when you're really after a really powerful card or one that you really think will help you. It always seems like somebody's there to take it out of the deck for you or remove it or buy it before you have a chance to. So let's head to the table and I'll teach you how to play. Here we have an example of one of the cards you'll be seeing in the game. At the top of the card is the minion's name. On the side of the card with the number is the cost and influence points that card is to purchase from the market. Underneath the minion's name is the aspect in Drow society that card is associated with, and there are 5 different ones: ambition, conquest, malice, guile, and obedience. Each one of these aspects has strengths and weaknesses, and some of them will give you bonuses or special things if you have a certain number of them. It is one of those strategies that's within the game. Underneath the picture is the actual effects of the card. So with this one we get to choose. You can either add 2 power to your reserve, or you can assassinate a troop. Underneath that then you have the card's flavor text, and it just gives you a little bit of backstory about that particular card. Then you have the card's symbol that it's affiliated with what type of half deck, and its number within that half deck. After that you have how many times the card appears in that half deck. So this one has 4 dots, so you'll have 4 copies of this card within the 40 cards of the half deck. After that you have the rectangle, the black rectangle, and that's going to give you the victory point value of the card in your deck, discard pile, or hands at the end of the game. If you promote the card to the inner circle, then you will gain the point value and victory points that are listed in the purple circle on the far side of the card. With board setup, the first thing you need to do is determine the number of players that are playing the game. As you can see, the board is broken into 3 sections with these 2 dotted lines. If you're playing a 2-player game, then only the middle of the board is going to be used. If you're playing a 3-player game, then the middle of the board is going to be used along with either the left or right section. If you're playing a 4-player game, then all 3 sections will be used. From there, the first thing you're going to do is go ahead and fill each space that has the crossed swords with a white troop in those spaces. Once you've completed that, then you can go ahead and grab the control markers and place them in each one of the cities that they're affiliated with. Once you're done with that, then you can go ahead and place out the victory point markers. Go ahead and grab 2 different half decks and shuffle them together. There are 4 different half decks that this game comes with. You have the Drow, Dragons, Elementals, and Demons. So once you have your 2 half decks shuffled, go ahead and place them in the market card section, and then draw the first 6 cards and place them in the top 6 market card spots. From here, go ahead and place out the house guards cards in their section and the priestesses. If you're playing with the demon half deck, then go ahead and put out the insane outcasts as well. From there, go ahead and choose 1 player to be the first player and give them the first player token. For player setup, each player will choose 1 dashboard and color to represent them in the game. Once they will receive that board which has a spot for their deck, their discard, their trophy hall, barracks, and it has a nice reference for their player turn. After that, then they will receive an inner circle token of their color, 5 spy tokens, a bag with their troops in it, and their starting cards for their deck. They will get 3 soldier cards and 7 noble cards. They can go ahead and shuffle that deck together. Once they're done with that, then they go ahead and draw the top 5 cards from that deck, and that will be their starting hands. The last thing players need to do before they're ready to start the game is that each player will grab one of their troop tokens and place it in one of the starting black spaces of their choice. So starting with the first player, each player will go around in clockwise order and place their game piece. So as you can tell, I'm playing a 4-player game. So each player will go ahead and place their starting piece, and then we're ready to start the game. I'd like to take a closer look at the game board now and some of the important terms that you're going to use throughout the game. So the first one we're going to look at are troop spaces, which are all the little circles, both in the squares and along the routes, that troops can be placed in. Now the next one we're going to look at is a grouping of those circles in a square is considered a site. From here, the next important term that you use throughout the game is presence. Most actions you take on the game map require you to have a presence where you wish to take that action. So in order to have presence, if it's at a site, you must have a troop in that site. So currently, like the red player here, has presence in this square. And he also has presence to any connecting troop space to this square. So he would have presence here and here. So when he's placing troops, he can either place them in one of those empty circles or in one of the joining routes to that space. Now, once you have presence in a route, then you can expand into other spaces. So let's go ahead and say for the orange player here, he has presence here and to all of the adjoining routes. So if he places a troop here, then he would also have presence into this space here and can continue expanding his troops into empty areas within those spaces. The next term we're going to look at is control. In order to have control over a site, you must have the most troops of any color in that site, including neutral troops. So in our first example, let's go ahead and take a look at this where 2 players have 1 troop in there. No one has control because no one has the most troops. But if red happens to put another troop in there, then red has gained control over that area. Now that also applies in spaces that have control tokens. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. So let's go ahead and say that we have this situation here. Red and the neutral are tied, so no one has control. But if red puts another troop in there, then he would gain control and get to take the marker token, which is going to give him +1 influence each time during his turn. And he would put that token in front of him. Now, the next term that we're going to look at is total control. So if a player has all the spaces filled with their troops and no enemy troops or spies are in the space, then they gain total control. So if the red guy was able to eliminate this neutral troop and place another one of his troops in this space, then he would gain total control over that space. In which case, then he would flip the token over, and now he would gain 1 influence point and 1 victory point on each of his turns, as long as he had total control. Now, if an enemy places a spy in there, then he would lose total control and go back to the control side. Or if one of his troops was assassinated, or he went down to 1 troop, and then orange came in there with one of his, then he would lose complete control, and the token would be placed back on the space. And then if orange, say, put another troop in there, then orange would take control of the token and would get that token. During a player's turn, they're going to play cards from their hand and use their resources to do a number of different actions. So before we get into that, the first thing I want to look at are the 2 resources that you're going to have in the game. So the first one is influence points, which are defined by spider webs in a circle, and for each one of those will grant you one influence point. And the main use for those is to purchase cards from the market. After that, then we have power, which is defined by the sword and shield in the circle. And for each one of those, you get one power. And as you can see on your player card, you can use power points to deploy troops. For 3 power points, you can assassinate a troop, and then for 3 points, you can return an enemy spy to that player. Now, there are other actions on some of the cards as you get the more advanced cards into your deck, which we're going to take a closer look at in a little bit. Once your turn is done, on the rest of the card, it's going to outline what you do next, which is to gain victory points from site control markers that you may have that you have complete control over. From there, then you would discard any cards you have in your hands to your discard pile, and then draw 5 new cards from your deck. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of those other actions that you can perform during your turn. So to illustrate this, I've gone ahead and added some more troops to the fields and given our player total control over one of the sites. So the first thing we're going to look at is to assassinate a troop, which you can do by spending 3 power, or some of the cards from the market will allow you to do that as well, such as the Dragon Claw. So to assassinate a troop, you can only do this where you have presence, and when you do it, you take that troop from the troop space and add it to your trophy haul. So let's go ahead and say that we played a card that allowed us to assassinate a troop. We would go ahead and remove that troop, since we have presence, which we do here, and add it to our trophy haul at the bottom of our card. So the next thing we're going to look at is to deploy a troop, which you can do by spending 1 power, or some of the cards will allow you to do that as well, such as the White Wavering, which will allow you to deploy 2 troops. So you would simply take 2 troops from your barracks, and then add them to a space that you have presence to. So, for example, we could add a troop here since we have presence, and we could add another troop there. If you don't have any troops left in your barracks, for every point of power you spend, you gain 1 victory point. The next thing we're going to look at is to devour a card. So let's go ahead and say that we played the White Wavering. That will allow you to devour a card from the marketplace. So you would look at the cards on the marketplace and choose one of them and add it to the devoured cards, essentially removing it from the game. This can be useful if you know a certain player is going after certain types of cards, or if there's a really powerful card out in the market that you can't afford. You can simply remove it from the market and add it to the devour cards, and then place the next card in the market. Supplant a troop. So a card like the Doppelganger will allow you to supplant a troop. So let's go ahead and take a look at how that works. So when you supplant a troop, you must have presence in an area where you have an enemy troop, and then you would simply assassinate that troop, remove it and add it to your trophy haul, and then add one of your own troops in that troop's space. So the next card we're going to play is going to allow us to make a choice. We can either choose to add 2 influence to our reserve, or we can choose to, at the end of our turn, promote another card played this turn. So this will allow us to take a look at how promote works. But the first thing we need to do is finish the rest of our turn. So after we're done with all of our actions, the next thing we're going to do is gain victory points for any site control markers we have, which we do, and we have total control over it, so it's going to give us 1 victory point. So we'll add 1 victory point to our trophy haul. From there, then we discard any of the cards played in your hand, so we still have 1 left. From there, then we can do our promotion. So the first thing we're going to do is the card that lets us promote a card is not a card that we can promote, so we'll take that out, and then we've played 3 cards this turn. So at this point, we would choose one of those cards and add it to our inner circle. So there's 2 reasons why a promote is a good thing. So at the beginning or early in the game, when you have those starter cards, you want to get those out of your deck so that you can get to the cards that you're purchasing from the market more quickly. Promoting cards will allow you to remove those cards from your deck and add them to the inner circle. Later in the game, as it's getting close to the end, you would like to promote cards, good cards from your deck, so that you get more victory points for them. Because as you can see, as we talked about earlier, the inner circle cards are going to be worth more than the regular deck cards. So at this point, let's go ahead and take a card from our deck that we used and add it to our inner circle, and you would do that face up. At that point, your turn is over, and you would simply draw 5 new cards from your deck, and it'll move to the next player. The end of the game triggers when one of the following 2 conditions are met. The first one is when a player deploys his last troop from his barracks and his barracks is empty, or when all the cards have been removed from the market deck and played out on the market. When one of these 2 conditions is met, all the rest of the players will get one final turn so that all players have had an equal number of turns, and then you would move into the scoring stage of the game. Tyrants in the Underdark gives you nice little score sheets to keep track of all your victory points at the end of the game. So you would simply just go right down this list and total up the victory points for each player. So the first one are victory points for each site you control. And as we talked about earlier in the game, you control a site if you have the most troops in that site. So we would get 2 points for this one. We wouldn't get any points for this one because it's even. We would get 3 points for this one because we have control. We would get 5 points for that one because we have the most troops. And then we get 2 points for this one and 2 points for that one. From there, then we would get 2 victory points for each site you have total control of. So we would get 2 points for having total control of that site and 2 points for having total control of that site. From there, then you would get 1 victory point for each troop in your trophy hall. So we would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 victory points for the troops that we have in our trophy hall. After that, then you get victory points for each card in your deck, hand, and discard pile. So you can simply just gather up all those cards and then count up each one of the black square spaces on them. And when you have that total, then you would add it to your score sheet. From there, then you get victory points for each inner circle card. So as we talked about earlier, then you would total up the points in the circle for each card that is in your inner circle and add those together. And then you would get victory points for any victory point tokens that you happen to have. Once you have all that, then you would add it up, and the player that has the most victory points is the winner of the game.